Hey there, I'm Elena. 4 years ago, my family sat me down in our old dining room, looked through me like I was already a ghost, and said I'd betrayed them. They swallowed my sister's lies. Lies so sharp, they carved me out of their lives in under an hour. I left with a suitcase, a secret growing inside me, and the weight of a truth they'd never see. Now they're fading, and I'm building something they can't touch. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you right now? What's the air like where you're sitting? This story's heavy, but it's mine, and I'm ready to share it. It was a foggy October evening in Astoria, Oregon, where the Columbia River kisses the Pacific. The air smelled of salt and damp cedar, and the town's Victorian houses leaned into the mist like they were guarding secrets. I was 28, back from Portland for what I thought was a family dinner. The drive down Highway 30 had been quiet, just me and the hum of my old Subaru, the windshield wipers slapping away the drizzle. I parked outside my parents' house, a sagging Queen Anne with peeling green paint, and brushed wet leaves off my boots. The air felt too still, like the world was holding its breath. Inside, there was no clatter of plates, no smell of Mom's clam chowder, just silence. My parents, my sister Marisol, and my brother Javier sat stiffly in the living room, their faces lit by the gray glow of the bay window. "Elena," Dad said, his voice flat. "Sit down." I did, my coat still on, the damp fabric sticking to my thighs. Marisol wouldn't meet my eyes. Javier's jaw was tight, like he was chewing on something bitter. "You've been stealing," Marisol said, her voice sharp as a fishhook. "From the restaurant's accounts." She slid a tablet across the coffee table, showing a spreadsheet with highlighted withdrawals. $5,000, $2,000, $700. My stomach dropped. "What? I haven't touched." I started, but Javier cut me off. "And you tried to sabotage my engagement. Lila told me you sent her those texts." His fiance's name landed like a slap. Texts? I'd never even met Lila alone. The accusations hit like a wave, but they weren't new. I flashed back to a summer 5 years earlier, the restaurant packed with tourists, the air thick with the scent of grilled salmon and garlic butter. I was 23, fresh from college, and had spent weeks analyzing our supply chain, cutting costs by rerouting seafood deliveries. I presented the plan at a family meeting, my notes scribbled in blue ink, my voice steady despite my nerves. Marisol interrupted halfway through, laughing. "Elena, nobody cares about your spreadsheets. Stick to washing dishes." Javier smirked, and Dad nodded at Marisol, saying, "Let's focus on real ideas." Later, Marisol pitched my plan as her own, and Mom hung a photo of her genius daughter in the dining room. I stood in the kitchen, scrubbing pots, my reflection warped in the steel sink, unseen. I looked at Mom now, waiting for her to speak. She just stared at her hands, her silver rings glinting dully. "You've changed, Elena," she whispered. "We don't know you anymore." Dad stood. "We've decided. You're out of the family business, out of the will. You need to leave, tonight." My breath caught. "Leave? You're serious?" Marisol's lips curled, not quite a smile. "We packed your things. They're by the door." I stumbled to the hallway, my legs numb. There was my suitcase, the one I'd used for college, next to a trash bag. On top, half crumpled, was the quilt Grandma Rosa had sewn me. Its blue star pattern faded from years of use. They'd tossed it like it was nothing. I grabbed it, my fingers trembling, and turned to Dad. "You're throwing this out too?" He shrugged, already walking away. "You won't need it where you're going." As I stood there, the memory of that summer meeting burned. The quilt in my hands felt heavier, a reminder of how long I'd been invisible. I didn't cry, not then. I dragged the suitcase to my car, the quilt clutched to my chest, and drove into the fog. The town's lights blurred behind me, and I ended up at a motel on the edge of Astoria, a squat building with a flickering neon sign that buzzed like a trapped fly. The room smelled of mildew and cheap pine cleaner. I sat on the bed, the springs creaking, and felt a faint flutter in my stomach. Not hunger, not nausea. Something else. I'd missed 2 periods. My hands shook as I pulled a pregnancy test from my bag, bought weeks ago but unopened. In the bathroom, under a flickering fluorescent bulb, I watched 2 lines appear. Positive. I slid to the floor, the tiles cold against my legs, and whispered to the tiny life inside me, "They can't take you away." The fog pressed against the window, thick and quiet, like it was holding its breath. That night, I opened my old journal, its leather cover soft and cracked. I hadn't written in it since grad school, when I was studying marine biology, dreaming of saving the coast's ecosystems. The pages smelled faintly of salt, like they'd absorbed Astoria itself. I flipped through entries. Late nights at the family restaurant, Marisol's sharp comments about my bookish ways, Javier taking credit for my ideas. One entry, from 3 years ago, stopped me cold. Marisol told Mom I'd never amount to anything because I care more about seaweed than family. Mom just nodded. Another entry, from my 21st birthday, burned even deeper. The family had thrown a party at the restaurant, the air thick with the smell of grilled salmon and the clink of wine glasses. I'd spent the day in the tide pools, sketching anemones, and arrived late, my hair damp with sea spray. Marisol pulled me aside and hissed, "You're embarrassing us." Grandma Rosa's the only one who thinks you're special, and she's half blind. Later, she took the stage, toasting the family's legacy, while I stood in the back, clutching a glass of soda. No one noticed when I left early. Grandma Rosa called the next day, her voice warm, saying, "You're my tide pool girl." But even she couldn't shield me from Marisol's venom. I closed the journal, my chest tight. I'd always been the odd one, the one who'd rather sketch tide pool creatures than charm customers. Marisol, with her perfect smile and quick wit, was the star. Javier, the charmer, could do no wrong. I was the one they overlooked, the one they blamed when things went wrong. And now, they'd built a lie so convincing they'd erased me. The next morning, I woke to the motel's thin walls rattling from a neighbor's TV. My bank account showed $312. My access to the restaurant's payroll system had been cut. I walked to the motel office, the gravel crunching under my boots, and begged the manager, a wiry man with a cigarette-stained mustache, for a weekly rate. "Can't do less than $50 a night," he said, barely looking up. I handed over $100, my hands shaking, knowing it was nearly a third of what I had left. At the market later, I bought day-old bread and a jar of peanut butter, the cashier's pitying glance burning my cheeks. Back in the room, I ate alone, the bread sticking in my throat, and overheard 2 women outside talking about the restaurant's new menu. "Heard the daughter's gone," one said. "Good riddance." I pressed my hands to my ears, but the words lingered. A few days later, I walked to the post office to check for mail, hoping for a refund check from a canceled subscription. The air was sharp with the scent of wet pavement and pine. As I turned the corner, I saw Mrs. Callahan, a family friend who dined at the restaurant every Sunday. Her gray hair was tucked under a knit cap, and she carried a canvas bag of groceries. I smiled, raising a hand, but her eyes narrowed, and she crossed the street, her steps quick. "Thief!" she muttered, loud enough to carry. I froze, my breath shallow. Back at the motel, I sat on the bed, the quilt across my lap, and wrote in my journal, "They've turned the town against me, but you're still here, little one. I'll be enough for you." The words steadied me, like a lighthouse in the fog. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "It's Mateo," I heard. "I'm in Astoria. Where are you?" Mateo, my old lab partner from college, the one who'd believed in my research when others laughed it off. I texted back the motel's address, my heart pounding. An hour later, he knocked, his dark hair damp from the rain, his eyes kind but tired. He didn't hug me, just stepped inside and sat on the room's wicker chair, its creak filling the silence. "You okay?" he asked. I shook my head. "They think I stole. They think I'm a monster." He listened as I spilled it all. The accusations, the quilt, the test. When I finished, he said, "You're not alone, Elena. Let's get you out of here." We drove to a diner on Commercial Street, the kind with sticky menus and coffee that tasted like burnt toast. The windows rattled from the wind off the river. Mateo ordered us both tea, then slid a napkin across the table. "Write down what you know you're good at," he said. I laughed, a brittle sound. "Now?" He nodded. "Now." I wrote, research, problem solving, seeing what others miss. He read it, then said, "That's your way out." He leaned back, his hands wrapped around his mug, and told me about his own breaking point. My brother Diego wanted me to stay on the farm, marry local, keep the family name clean. When I left for Portland to start my nonprofit, he cornered me in the barn, said I was betraying our roots. I haven't been back since. His voice was steady, but his eyes held a familiar ache. "You don't need their permission to be you," he said. I nodded, the tea's warmth seeping into my palms, grounding me. Back at the motel, I sat alone, the pregnancy test still on the nightstand. The rain had stopped, and the room was quiet except for the drip of a leaky faucet. I pressed my hand to my belly, feeling the faint pulse of my own heartbeat. The baby, my baby, was real, a truth no one could twist. But it terrified me. I had no job, no home, barely enough for a week's rent. Yet that flutter was a promise, a reason to keep going. I opened my journal to a blank page. "Dear you," I wrote, "I don't know who you'll be, but I'm already fighting for you." I described the motel, the fog, the quilt I'd saved. I wrote about Grandma Rosa, who'd taught me to read the tides, who'd seen me when no one else did. She'd left me her pearl earrings, hidden in a cigar box, but Marisol had claimed them after her funeral, saying they were meant for the real daughter. I'd stayed silent then, too afraid to fight. Now, I wasn't silent. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the page was full of promises. I'd be enough for this child, even if I wasn't enough for them. Mateo came by the next day with a lead, a research grant for coastal conservation, open to independent scholars. "It's small," he said, "but it's a start." I applied from the motel's spotty Wi-Fi, my CV patched together from memory. 2 weeks later, I got the email. $10,000, enough to rent a tiny studio above a bookstore in Astoria's downtown. The apartment smelled of old paper and sea air, the windows rattling in the wind. I hung the quilt over the couch, its stars a quiet rebellion. The grant let me start Tide Pool Labs, a project to develop sustainable algae-based fertilizers for local farms. It was the kind of work my family had mocked. Marisol once called it playing with pond scum, but it was mine. I set up a makeshift lab in the studio, using secondhand equipment and Mateo's contacts. He never tried to take over, just showed up with coffee or a spare microscope, his quiet presence a steady anchor. The work was grueling, but not without hope. One morning, I pitched my fertilizer to a local farmer, Tom, a gruff man with sun-weathered skin. He crossed his arms, skeptical. "Sounds like hippie nonsense," he said, kicking at the dirt. I spent weeks refining the formula, testing it on his smallest field. When the crops showed a 15% yield increase, he called, voice softer. "Guess you're onto something, kid." That small victory felt like a brick in a new foundation. Another challenge came when a county official, Mr. Dorsey, questioned my lab's permits, claiming my equipment violated zoning codes. His office smelled of stale coffee and bureaucracy, and his smirk said he didn't take me seriously. I spent nights researching regulations, my belly growing, and found a loophole allowing temporary research exemptions. I presented it at a town hall, my voice steady despite the room's skeptical stares. Dorsey relented, and Amara, in the back, gave me a thumbs up. That win, small but hard won, felt like proof I could outsmart the obstacles. I spent days in the lab, nights researching, my body changing as the baby grew. Morning sickness hit hard, and I'd lean over the sink, whispering, "We're tougher than this." I faced setbacks, Failed experiments, skeptical farmers, a landlord who raised the rent. Worse were the doubts. What if they were right? What if I'm nothing? But every time I wavered, I'd touch the quilt and keep going. Astoria's community started to notice. Amara, a black farmer with a sharp laugh and a knack for soil science, tested my fertilizer and spread the word. Wei, a Chinese-American librarian with a love for history, helped me access old agricultural records. They weren't family, but they saw me, and that was enough. One evening, Mateo and I walked Astoria's pier, the river dark and restless below. The air smelled of fish and salt, and the gulls screamed overhead. I'm scared I'll fail her, I admitted, my hand on my belly. Mateo stopped, his boots scuffing the wood. I was scared too when I started the nonprofit. Thought I'd crash and prove Diego right. He smiled faintly. You're not failing, Elena. You're building. His words settled like a warm coat, and we stood there, watching the lights on the water. Two people who'd chosen their own paths. Later that week, Mateo invited me to his tiny office, a cluttered space filled with maps and grant proposals. He pulled a folded letter from a drawer, its edges worn. Diego sent this after I left, he said, his voice low. Called me a coward for chasing dreams over duty. He handed it to me, the paper heavy with years of silence. I keep it to remind myself I'm not him. I told him about the quilt, how it held Grandma Rosa's love. We sat there, two keepers of relics, our truths laid bare. That moment, quiet but deep, felt like family. A year later, Tide Pool Labs was gaining traction. A regional sustainability conference invited me to present, a chance to secure bigger funding. I was 7 months pregnant, my navy dress stretched tight, but I felt unstoppable. Mateo drove me to the conference hotel, a sleek building with glass walls reflecting the river. He parked a block away, letting me walk in alone. You've got this, he said. Inside, I froze. A banner hung in the lobby, Marisol Vega Foundation for Coastal Progress. My sister's face beamed down, her name tied to a grant program using my old research, word for word, no credit. My heart pounded, but I kept walking. On stage, I presented my data, algae yields, soil health, farmer testimonials. Then I clicked to my final slide, a photo of me in the lab, Lucia's ultrasound taped to the wall. This is mine, I said, my voice steady. Not a foundation's, not a family's. Mine. The room was silent, then erupted in murmurs. A journalist asked, Are you accusing the Vega Foundation of theft? I didn't flinch. I'm stating facts, check the timestamps. That night, Mateo uploaded my slides online, captioned, The truth grows stronger than lies. The post spread, and my inbox filled with support and threats. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from Marisol's lawyer, accusing me of defamation, demanding I retract everything. I didn't. Instead, I hired Priya, a South Asian lawyer with a fire in her eyes. She dug up emails, lab logs, even a recording of Marisol bragging about borrowing my work. We filed a countersuit for intellectual property theft. The courthouse was cold, the wood benches hard against my back. Lucia, now a month old, slept in a carrier against my chest. Marisol walked in, her heels clicking, but her eyes darted, searching for allies. Mom and Dad sat on her side, their faces blank. Javier wasn't there. Priya presented our evidence. Timestamps, recordings, my name on every original draft. Marisol's team tried to spin it. Sibling rivalry, a misunderstanding, but the judge wasn't swayed. Your Honor, I said, standing, they didn't just steal my work, they stole my place. I'm taking it back. The judge granted an injunction. Marisol's foundation was barred from using my research. As we left, reporters swarmed. One asked, What do you say to your family? I looked at Lucia, her tiny hand curled against me, and said, Nothing. I said it in court. Tide Pool Labs grew. The conference led to a $50,000 grant, then a partnership with Amara's farm network. I hired Way part-time, and Mateo joined as a consultant. Lucia became the lab's unofficial mascot, her giggles echoing as I worked. The studio was cramped, but it was home, filled with the quilt, Lucia's toys, and the smell of seaweed and hope. My family unraveled quietly. Marisol's foundation collapsed under scrutiny. She moved to Seattle, her social media silent. Javier's engagement fell apart, and he left Astoria. Mom and Dad stayed in their house, but neighbors said they rarely left. I didn't gloat. Their absence was punishment enough. One spring morning, Lucia and I planted a cedar sapling in the community garden behind the bookstore. She was 2, her hands clumsy, but determined as she patted the soil. "Tree grow big?" she asked. "Big as you," I said, kissing her forehead. Mateo and Amara joined us, bringing lemonade and laughter. The garden wasn't grand, just a patch of earth between brick walls, but it was ours. That night, I found a package on my doorstep. Inside were Grandma Rose's pearl earrings, wrapped in a note. "I found these. They're yours. Javier." I didn't cry. I slipped the earrings into Lucia's keepsake box next to the quilt. They were a reminder, not of loss, but of what I'd reclaimed. I'm sitting on my studio's fire escape now, Lucia asleep inside, the river glinting under the moon. Astoria's fog is rolling in, soft and cool, like it's cradling the town. I'm 32, a mother, a scientist, a woman who built something from ashes. My family tried to erase me, but I didn't need their name to shine. I needed Lucia's light, Mateo's steadiness, Amara's trust, Way's stories. I needed me. Wherever you are, whatever light you're sitting in, know this. You don't need their approval to build something true. Plant your sapling, keep your quilt, you're enough. The weight of ashes mirrors the emotional depth and structure of the provided example, focusing on family betrayal, exile, and resilience. Like Narina's journey, Elena's story begins with a devastating betrayal, false accusations by her siblings, leading to her abrupt exile. The narrative arcs from despair to empowerment as Elena discovers her pregnancy, finds an ally in Mateo, and builds Tide Pool Labs, reclaiming her passion for marine biology. The confrontation, exposing Marisol's theft, echoes Narina's courtroom victory, affirming Elena's truth without family approval. Astoria's moody setting reflects Elena's emotional states, from fog-shrouded isolation to sunlit renewal. Extended flashbacks, hardship scenes, and deepened relationships add richness, ensuring a fuller narrative. The story emphasizes chosen family and self-acceptance, ending with a symbolic cedar sapling for Lucia's legacy.